Okay, we're ready.
Did you shoot this?
I'm working on it.
Now they were from Leavenworth?
The two brothers went to Leavenworth. They were natives of New York. I wrote that on there because.
Oh, yeah, I see that now.
So they.
Oh, they did not immigrate from Europe.
Oh, of course they did.
Oh, they did?
But I don't know when. I haven't been able to quite figure that part out.
Huh.
Let me sit here, there.
Why don't you sit where you started, and then let me see how I can adjust for the backlight.
I don't know. I don't know where the. Oh, the Woolfs are from England. I do know that. The Woolfs are from England, and there's still a couple Woolfs in England.
Is there really a relationship with Virginia Woolf?
Yes, actually, her husband, Leonard Woolf, was a famous writer and sociologist from the Bloomsbury Group and changed the way we think about psychology and sociology. Isn't that somebody, some super famous guy? His wife was Virginia Woolf.
Pretty cool.
Uh-huh.
Pretty cool.
Uh-huh.
So you can say there's Virginia Woolf in your background, even if it's you gotta
Yeah,
go a
she's
little
an
bit.
in-law.
You gotta go left and right on the family tree. I am starting to tape.
Where are you going on Sunday?
We're gonna have
For
a
the
place,
summer.
in the Northwest, and we're going to Friday Harbor, Washington, in the San Juan Islands. And Lynn, we like to race sailboats, and there's a big international race about this time. We always do, and it's in a week. It goes from Victoria, Canada, down to Nia Bay and back. It's a blast.
How long have you been doing that?
Oh no, quite a while. We didn't learn how to do it till about 15, 20 years ago. I don't know when. We just, Lynn, let's go sailing. I'm like, I'm not buying a boat. So he went and got some junk and fixed it up. We got in the water. He read a book. I don't know.
Great.
So now we can do the biggest race in the Americas. Is that crazy? Well, not Transcap or something.
Well, good luck with it.
I'm rolling.
Well, welcome to another interview for the Kansas City Garment Industry Project. Today is May 13th, 2011. I'm John Dvorak, and I'm interviewing Linda Lighton, who is an expert on the famous Woolf Brothers clothing store and whose family operated the store. The videographer is Mark Titus. Linda, Woolf Brothers was not just a store. It really was, it's part of the Kansas City history. As you look back on the history of the store, what are a couple things you would really like us all to remember about the business?
You want me to start with the history or just...
What are a couple of things that you're proudest of about the company?
Well, it was interesting. As I look back on it, we were... they still don't have a store like that here today now. They have all the designers, and they had a lot of grace. They took care of a lot of people. It's a really polished place. It was very nice, very nice. You always felt good when you went in there. And Alfred took care of so many people. And then the history of it's really interesting also.
The store's been gone now for not quite 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
Do people still remember it, do you think?
Oh, of course. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Everybody remembers it. A lot of people do. And there's still a lot of the people that are working all those stores are all around town and some other stores. Yeah, you see them all the time. Halls, Tibbles, everything.
Now, your father was Alfred Lighton, and he was the last president of the store, is that correct?
Yes. Well, the store got bought at the end, and then there was a president, Dan Carpenter bought it, and it, he sold off the assets pretty much and gave it back to Alfred with some debt. It was not a real well managed sale, but a lot of that was going on right at that time.
How did your father come to get that position?
As the president of the store, he Herbert Woolf, who was his uncle, his mother's brother, right? Ran the store, and he was one of the Wolves. And Alfred, I think he probably was in the military, and then he went right to the store and probably had to work his way somewhat up through the ranks. But his uncle was the inherited owner. And in the late 30s, I believe, the Kansas City Star, when it went out of business, when the guy died, it was wasn't Nelson or something, who was it? The guy that was running the Star. He was gonna split all that up into stocks and hand out shares and have all of the people that worked there own it. It was a big thing to do at that time, and Herbert thought he would do that with the store when he got ready to die. And then I think, and then he changed his mind, so Alfred just kind of went up through the ranks and then became president. And I think that originally they thought that Alfred would probably be on the farm and work with the horses, but then he ended up.
But your father worked a long time in
the whole time, full time, every day.
Did he work from the ground up? Was he like
yeah, he started. Yeah, started, but of course it was part of the family. So, but yeah, and then he arrived there, and then we owned it. It was his two sisters and him were the owners, and he ran it.
Well, let's go back to the beginning and talk about the roots of the store. There were two Woolf brothers who came here from Leavenworth.
Yeah. No, they moved to Leavenworth from New York. And it says that Samuel died in 1895. He married in 1872. And here it says, Alfred was 16 years old in 1862. So he must have been a little younger, I'm thinking. And, it says they're buried out at Elmwood Cemetery. He died in 1915. So the two brothers moved from New York to Leavenworth. And there was a fort there, Fort Leavenworth, I guess. Mm-hmm. And they got the contract to make clothing for the military, which was a really prized thing.
This would have been in the late 1800s?
1860s, yeah.
Oh, 1860s.
Yeah, at Civil War time.
I see.
Yeah.
Do you know, were they successful in Leavenworth?
So they started this, I always look at it like, can you imagine these Jews coming over from Europe, and a lot of the Jews were rag traders. You couldn't own land, and so they were doing something. So there's always all these Jews in the rag trade. So they ended up in Leavenworth, and they had a shirt factory there, and they made clothes for the military.
Do you know, were they pretty successful at that?
Yeah, they were. They probably started from a wagon, and then they got a store in Leavenworth. And then when they built the bridge into Kansas City, it was you know the name of the bridge? Just the bridge.
Yeah, it was the Hannibal Bridge.
Hannibal Bridge. Yeah, it opened up the west, right. And so they figured out it was on the river, they better move up here. So they had a store in Leavenworth, then they had a store in Kansas City, right? And then Herbert, ended up running that store, so that was his, it was Samuel's kid. No, it wasn't, it was Alfred's child, it was Herbert.
He ended up running the Kansas City store.
Yeah, they moved. I suspect that they still kept a store in Leavenworth, but they moved their main headquarters to Kansas City.
Were they downtown?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Do you know about what time they opened the Kansas City store?
Would you know when was the Hannibal Bridge, Mark?
About 1890, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it was just when the bridge went in and
Right
everybody
around
moved.
around
because
Hannibal.
Leavenworth was the big show then. Yeah, they were successful. I said we have receipts from Buffalo Bill Cody, Bat Masterson. They made it.
That they bought stuff from the store?
You didn't go buy stuff. There wasn't stuff to buy it like that in those days. You had to go order. They took your measurements and they made shirts, and they cut them for you. They didn't have ready to wear back then.
So they were not only a supplier to the military, but they sold at retail.
I
I see. Do you know why they came to Kansas City? Did they just see it as
Yeah,
a
because
great
of the bridge, yeah.
They saw it as a
Yeah.
place to be.
And then Kansas City became the big place, you know, the big city after that.
How did the store do here in the early part of the 1900s? Do you know?
Yeah. We have, I know that David Boutros probably has the books, some of the books. I had a lot of the books from Woolf Brothers. Yeah, it did good. It did good. It did good a lot. Sometimes Herbert borrowed a little too much money on the horses. Yeah. But yeah, they did fine. And at the height, you know, like in the 1960, Alfred was already into it then. But Herbert started expanding the store after it came to Woolf Brothers. And yeah, there was one in Topeka. You know, there was one in Dallas and Fort Worth. There was one in Tulsa, Oklahoma. There was 3 or 4 stores here in Kansas City. At the top, there was like 14 stores.
In the region. What
Some of them had different names. Some of them were called Dreyfus and Sons, and some of them were called Filet Halley. And then after a while, I mean, even when I was a kid, they were still called that.
But they were all owned by the Wolves.
It's all the same store, yeah.
What type of merchandise were they selling, generally speaking?
So it started with men's clothes, and it, yeah. Now I can remember as a child that they had women's clothes at the downtown. So it started for a long time just men's clothes and men's haberdashery.
Was it finer men's clothes or just
Yeah.
all kinds of men's clothes?
No, just it was finer men's clothes.
Suits and slacks.
Yeah, suits, slacks, yeah, and then they could make them for you. And we always had a shirt factory all the way up until it closed.
Did they make anything other than shirts?
Oh well, they could, but yeah, we ordered from the big makers, you know, the great makers.
But you made shirts from
But
scratch.
they always made shirts. Yeah, you could have them made by you.
Was that something they were famous for?
Sure. Yeah. Why not? Yeah.
And you say they then eventually got into women's clothes as well? Was men's clothing always their big merchandise though, or do you know?
Yeah, it started out as men's. Men was always the big part of it. I think when they opened the Plaza store too, it was just first men's and then they expanded it to women's. But I don't know, since I didn't really work there, I don't know if the men's was the bigger part of the business. I don't know, women's clothes are awfully expensive, aren't they? Of course, a man's suit can be $1,200, $2,000 for
too.
one.
Was the store successful World War I, the 20s, the 30s?
Then I know they made uniforms again in World War I, of course, yeah.
So it really was a successful venture
Oh,
over
if
here.
you look on here, you can see these advertisements. They're just, hey Mark, can you make it work so I can just see it with pictures? I had it on here 2 ways. There's the arrow here. Let's see, I don't need that. I have this, and I also have it so I can see it from my desktop upstairs. But if we can make this be pictures, you can see these ads are outrageous from World War I and II. It says, why don't you hold back? What? Do you know how to make them into rows of pictures? I had them at one point. I think I had it from there. But that might be that one back there.
Images.
Well, no, that says images.
I
Is
don't
this
know.
one? You don't know?
I'm
expecting you
not
to
a
be
Mac.
techno man.
Why do you say the ads were outrageous?
There's things like, look at now. If I could just hold that, I can scroll through. Come on down, and I'll show you some. Look at, we had always famous ads. I'm going to see what the new Knox straw hats look like. These are gas, but a lot of them from during the war. They would ask you, say, we're melting down our boiler, you know, to give for metal for the war effort. It's so interesting. We would never do that now, would we?
Oh, make a sacrifice?
Yeah, make the sacrifice. All this stuff about we're putting in gardens, we're doing this stuff. It was just amazing. Here's when they're opening a store, I think at from downtown. We're still here on downtown in Walnut, and that was in let's see how you do this. Oh God, I'm the worst interview. Let's see. Okay, ask me the question and I'll get back to the thing. You're asking me about ads. They always had really famous ad makers that were really wonderful.
Where was the store on Wall? You said it was on
Yeah,
Walnut?
1020 Walnut downtown.
I see. Now, was Herbert in full charge? I mean, he ran the place?
Yep, he did.
What kind of a guy was he?
He was really good looking. I think they had 300 or 400 employees. Here's his obit right here. Can I read it to you?
No. No, we can look at that later.
He was really dashing. He was into horses. He ran the store. He was the first man to ever think of using a plane for shipping things from store to store.
Using an airplane?
Mm-hmm. And so he was considered an incredibly dynamic businessman.
Have you heard anything about how he was personally, how he treated the employees and how they liked or disliked him?
I think he really took care of them. Alfred took such good care of the employees. No, everybody was there forever. So many nice things. Really took care of so many people. It was really nice to them.
That was a different era, wasn't it?
Yeah,
That wasn't
and I
the
mean, when
Walmart
the
era.
stores started closing, it's like, we're going to keep them all on. We've got to, Mm-hmm.
Well, now, how did Herbert branch off into horses?
Well, I think at first he was raising cows. What did they do? Everybody had a farm, because Granny had a farm too, out at 110th and Metcalf. And then Herbert's farm was on 83rd there in Mission. So I suppose it was a hobby. He started raising cows and had what he thought were some winning cows that he showed at the state fair, and he didn't win. And I think that he thought it wasn't being fair, but so I think he got into horse racing because you could for sure see if something won, and it wasn't so.
You think that's why he switched to horses?
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Did he raise a lot of horses, or strictly thoroughbred race horses, or?
Yeah, thoroughbred race horses mostly. And then he rode, I suspect. I never saw him riding, but I suspect he did. My dad rode. We would ride almost every day. If he could, we'd ride every day.
Was he successful as a horse racer?
Oh yeah, he was. He was. We have a lot of trophies all over. We have so many trophies. We have stacks and stacks of them. Split them up. I've got a lot of them here. Mm-hmm.
Now, he had one big winner, Lauren.
Well, I think he had more than one. He had a lot of big winners, but he only won Kentucky Derby.
Lauren won the Kentucky Derby.
Uh-huh.
Tell me about Lauren, because you
Well, I met him.
met the horse.
He didn't talk back to me too much. Yeah. So he was at the farm over on Mission Road there.
Did you ride him?
I think I got up on him once, but no, I didn't ride a racehorse like that. You didn't do that. That's not par for the course. He wasn't it's not like exactly like a pet. There was 40 horses. There was a lot of horses out there. But we had our own horses.
You were a youth then, but
Uh-huh.
did you understand that this was a horse that had been at
Yeah.
the top of
Yeah.
the industry?
Sure. Uh-huh. Yeah, and Herbert kept a seat at the Kentucky Derby or a booth or whatever they call it.
Box.
A box, yeah, for years. And Alfred kept it. I guess you could have one if you won.
Did you know Herbert pretty well?
No, because what did he do? Died in 72, and I was pretty young. Let's see, he might have died earlier than that. He didn't die in 72. He died in 65. Well, I was...
10.
Yeah, no. I hate to tell you, I was 17. So I knew him like a kid would know a person.
What do you remember about him just personally?
I remember him playing cards, and he was really dapper, and he always wore a boater, you know, this kind of hat, flat straw hat with the stripes on it. And he always told me to stand up straight, and yeah, he liked to play cards, and him and Granny would grouch around with each other a little bit. She'd hold court. So it was interesting.
Did you find him a likable man?
He had a lot of charm and charisma, you could tell, but no, he didn't like kids. You know, he didn't want to hang out with kids. No, he wasn't some jolly good grandfather. He would be like my grandfather, but in fact, no. They were more formal, or was it a different era? People were more formal, but he wasn't. He wasn't fun-loving granddaddy, no.
Were you aware that he was an important and respected businessman?
Oh, absolutely.
In town?
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh. You know, even your parents didn't play with you that much back then. I don't know, you're of my age group. Seems like it. At least mine didn't.
Now, the store, we get into World War II and the 50s, and he was still in charge of the store at that time.
Mm-hmm.
So
Alfred was probably vice president, you know.
Was the company still doing well after?
Yeah,
World
in the
War II?
60s it expanded out to Blue Ridge Mall. Think of it, there was one or two in Dallas, and there was Tulsa. I don't know, there's Wichita. And I know here in Kansas City there was Ward Parkway, the plaza. We had that whole block of the plaza. And then the downtown store, which is the most beautiful store. It had these arched windows onto the street, so it wouldn't, arched glass like that. You could kind of walk under them so it wouldn't have a shadow. And wonderful windows. And that store was what, 3 or 4 floors. And then they had one out at, you know, about 195th and Metcalf. There was one over here at Blue Springs.
All over.
Yeah.
It was quite a chain.
Uh-huh.
Did you ever work in it?
No, I did as a 16-year-old. I remember selling lingerie in there like you're 16, and some lady came in and told me she was in the business. I was probably trying to sell her a flannel nightgown. I was clueless. I had no idea what she was talking about. I had to go get somebody. I worked in the back and labeled things and priced things and stuff, yeah.
Did you not like working there?
Well, you know, the salespeople didn't like me working there because they all got a commission, I think, too. It was interesting. It's kind of interesting. I wrapped packages as a kid at Christmas time or something. You learn how to do that professionally. That was good.
But as a young adult, you never worked there full time.
No, it was 1965, and I was quite interested in not being involved with that kind of thing. I was busy being a hippie.
Now, the Woolf Brothers Company became known as a major charitable contributor in town too. What were one or two of its
They did?
big charities?
I never heard it quite put like that. Well, I know Alfred liked to support a lot of underdogs, and he helped people, you know, since he had been shot. God, okay, let me go back. You know, all these Jews, think about it. My Herbert, Granny, they all grew up, Alfred grew up on Armour Boulevard. And my mom, my grandfather lived on Mannheim Road east of Troost, and there was a whole enclave of kind of wealthy Jews. It was a ghetto. But it was wealthy, but it was ghetto, you know. And they all lived right over there. The Moonies and Strausses, everybody lived over there. Almonds. And they were all buddies forever. And so you weren't allowed to belong to a country club. So Herbert and Alfred, you know, they built, you know, the Jewish cemetery out here. You know, Herbert and the Hartsfells built that thing.
On Troost?
On Troost. And then they, you know, a Jewish doctor in Kansas City could not work at even Truman, any public hospital, until 1967 or maybe later. I mean, it's breathtaking to think that. So Herbert, and I think maybe I had never thought of it said as Woolf Brothers was philanthropic, but I know Herbert and some other people, they built Menorah. There's a place for Jewish doctors to work, and anybody and people could go too. So then they built Oakwood Country Club, and one of the goals of my father was to really integrate and my mother, and maybe even before that. Of course, they changed their name during the war to Lighton, and that was to integrate themselves in the city. So they were some of the first people to help fund. Granny was from, and maybe Alfred were some of the first people to fund the Jewel Ball. So this is, I don't know if this thing was billed as Woolf Brothers. I'd never thought of it like that. But
Perhaps it wasn't Woolf Brothers.
maybe that's a way to say it.
Per se, but it was the people behind Woolf Brothers. And I don't know if philanthropy is the right word, but if they were involved in developing a hospital and a country club and a cemetery, those are pretty important contributions right there.
When Herbert also built, as I told you, he built all of the movie theaters here in town. It's not the garment industry, we're off of it. It's hard to focus on that.
He was involved in the early days of movie
Yeah, I
theater?
discovered Jean Harlow, and I think that Sissy Strauss's relatives were the mayors from that Metro Goldwyn Mayer.
MG.
Think about that. So it's out in LA. There's all these Jews there. I think that that Jean Harlow. I think they said Herbert discovered her. He was always out with all these beautiful women, and often had Gert, his granny's daughter, my dad's sister, he took her around to a lot of horse shows, and they were out, being with the movies. Think of how glamorous it was. They were pretty glamorous people, weren't they?
Now, Herbert did not marry or have children, is that correct?
That's correct.
Were they important contributors to the Symphony Orchestra?
Oh, I'm sure. I would suspect so. It's Gene Strauss's thing mostly. I mean, it has been. But yeah, they all give each other a call. You know how it works. So yeah.
How did they feel about the fact that they were important people in town and well-to-do, but yet were discriminated against?
I never heard a word about it. I just keep looking at it in that way because I think that interests me. But no, we never talked about it. They were totally. We always just say they were. Looking back, they were totally waspirant. But if you put it into context of what was going on, it's a way of integrating yourself, and I think that was really important to them, and probably important to a lot of, even though they weren't immigrants, they're still kind of others.
They didn't complain about it
No, never heard
in your hearing?
No, never heard a word.
Or even
about it.
discuss it?
But I heard Uncle Richard tried to move to Leawood in the 60s or the late 50s, and you couldn't. They wouldn't allow Jews in Leawood. This was a Catholic enclave here, this neighborhood, with these big houses and lots of room for all those kids. So I don't know. I always keep putting things in those kind of contexts. Probably just because it interests me.
But the fact that they were Jews did not hurt the business any. The business was very successful.
That's where you get the good clothes, isn't it? They treated everybody really well,
We had a garment manufacturing industry in Kansas City up through the 60s, really. Do you know, did they buy much in the way of Kansas City clothes for their store?
Well, they must have. Bob Slagman was like, Bob Slagman, they did coats, the Blocks did what? Yeah, all of these different people. And of course, they're all, it's part of the gang. They all, so weird that my father grew up and died with the same 5-10 men, the Blocks, the Slagmans, the Levitts, it's kind of crazy. So yeah, I'm sure they did business with each other.
But they would have bought merchandise from all over the United States and outside the United States.
For me. And then they made their own, and then they contracted with all the great things. And then, of course, they had Jeffrey Bean and Bill Blass, Oscar de la Renta. They all came here, Pauline Trugere, not here, but at our house on 54th, and stayed with us. And that was fun. And Eileen Ford came through and she invented her first makeup and had a line of brushes, and I got to go around. She'd make up my face and show people how to do it. It was the first kind of thing.
Eileen Ford made you up?
Yeah, we'd go around to all the stores and I'd sit there and what was I, 13, 14, you know? Yeah, that's kind of cool. Yeah, and she stayed upstairs, you know, in the guest room.
You paint this picture of all of these fascinating and important people running around when you were a youth.
Clothing people.
How did you feel about that?
I didn't know. I thought it was normal. I mean, for me, it was normal. You don't think your youth is out of context. Man, we had a pretty weird youth, I'll tell you. But Mark might have come over a couple of times. Do you think you ever did?
Well, you know, I was always fascinated because Robert got into the rag business right out of college and did that British khaki and everything.
No, he didn't stick with Woolf Brothers because Alfred was difficult to work with.
Right, but so he went off.
We were so thrilled when he did that.
Yeah.
And he got his degree in business, and yeah, of course he did that. So how old are you?
I graduated in '67.
So I graduated in 65, 66. You're 1 year
2 years younger than you.
And my brother was 3 years younger.
Right.
So
he was right
a
behind
lot
me.
of parties at my house. But
yeah.
They sent Robert away and Jeannie away. I stayed. So, you know, because I kept my mouth shut. But,
well, you were more surreptitious at the time.
Oh, God. You're the only person that's ever called me that, but I remember. Yeah, so
you graduated high school in '65, did you say?
Yeah, from Sunset, and mother graduated from Sunset, and so did her sister, and shit, I don't know when, a long time ago.
So you're 2 years older than I am.
Uh-huh.
That was not a real easy time to graduate high school and go to college. There was a lot happening in the country. You say you kind of became a hippie?
Yeah, I didn't want to have it. I wanted to go to art school, and Alfred, they weren't supporting me on that. They sent me away to centenary college for young women, yeah. But that wasn't too good.
What was wrong with you going into art?
Well,
why didn't they like that?
Their idea was for me to serve hors d'oeuvres and marry a wealthy man and serve hors d'oeuvres, and they didn't think that the people over the Institute, even though they were probably major funders of them, they just didn't want me hanging with that ilk. I would guess.
Because they were strong supporters of the arts, weren't they?
Yes, they were. And my grandmother was the first treasurer of the Friends of Art in the 30s, and I think she did a lot of funding of whatever was over there.
So you went into the arts despite them?
Yeah, I did. I wasn't getting a lot of support on any fronts from them, so I think it was just difficult then. So.
You went to college, did you say, at Centenary?
Yeah, I just did a year, and then I quit.
Where did you get arts training?
So then I was is this part of the interview? Are we off or what?
Oh, no.
Do we need to know this, or do you want to know?
Well, I would like to know where you went to college, where you went to school.
Well, I just went there for a year, and then I was out and about for some time. And then I had a daughter by the time I was 21. I went out to Haight-Ashbury and did all that thing. And then I had a daughter when I was 21, and in Seattle. And when she was 3, I went to the Factory of Visual Arts in Seattle. It was an unaccredited art school.
I see.
But I just wanted to do art. It's all I really wanted to do from the start, from when I was a kid.
And you had no interest, and the family had no interest in you working in the store?
Well, I could have done it if I'd wanted to, probably. It probably would have been good for them. I mean, they had a lot of, maybe they were striving for me. I've never said it like that, but maybe. And they wanted me to look good, keep my mouth shut, serve some hors d'oeuvres, and I think a lot of people wanted that for their kids back then. It didn't look that good to me.
Well, things weren't going too well with the store as you entered your young adulthood. When did things begin to When did there begin to be problems with the store?
Well,
Or the
there was
company?
when was this flood?
77.
77. So Alfred and my mother split up that year. They had to flood, and Alfred got shot. I think all in 77.
The flood damaged the Plaza store.
So is that I know some year in that that was tough. And then Alfred was sick. Yeah, Alfred got shot.
Well, you've mentioned that a couple times. Tell us generally what happened.
I think that he had split up with Mother, and he was with Bob and Betty Slegman. They were on the plaza, and he was with Joe Sanditz. She doesn't live here anymore. She might not be alive anymore. So, they were up above the plaza.
They were in your apartment building. And it happened in the parking lot behind your apartment building.
I didn't live here then. I lived on the West Coast. I was staying clear of my
Are you
family.
sure?
Yeah, I know for a fact that they were coming out of Parkway Towers, and they were going to the parking lot. They had been like at the Waldmans, and they, Bob and Betty Slegman and Alfred.
And Joe Sanditz. I always thought it was Marge Navrin, but I talked to Ann Slegman the other day about it, and she said no, it was Joe Sanditz.
And they got mugged
And they
in the
took their
parking lot,
wallets.
and Alfred and Bob wouldn't stand for it.
No, when I heard it, you heard it that way. You tell the story.
No, you tell the story.
Wait, I keep.
We're interviewing you, not him or me.
Okay.
But I live at Parkway Towers, just to
Oh.
clarify things. But
So
yeah.
you gotta understand, Alfred was this really good-looking, big man. He was 6'3½",
But he
But-
didn't take kindly to the mugging, I gather.
I think from in my mind's eye, the way that I thought was that he gave them the money. They all gave them their wallets, and then he just was like couldn't stand it, so he went after him, and they turned around and shot both of them. And Bob got shot in the stomach, and and Ann was saying, well, he had a layer of fat, and it went through and out the other side, and it didn't hit any organs. But Alfred got shot in the neck, and got paralyzed from the neck down.
Your father was paralyzed from the neck down?
Yeah.
Well, he recovered from that, though, didn't he, to an extent?
Sorta. So, yeah, he loved a challenge. He loved a physical challenge. Yeah, he should have been in the. He should have been in the horse business. But
But he walked with a cane.
He walked with a cane. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a big struggle. Yeah. And then and of course in all that same year, that's the three big things. Can you imagine?
Well, so did things kind of begin to deteriorate after that for the company?
I don't know. I would suspect that was a big hit. And Robert had the Subway store. God, these aren't any of the questions I thought this would be like.
Did Robert run the Subway?
Yeah, Robert invented it and did that
wow.
store. And it was,
That was
I don't
so
think
cool.
it was so bad. I don't think that the retailing industry went down till must have been the 80s or just after the 80s. So the Reagan era was very wealthy, and then things started getting really tough for retailing because of J. Crew and Banana Republic and all those. They used to
Gap.
have those big chains of all this stuff, Guess jeans and all this stuff.
So you're saying the problems for Woolf Brothers came maybe in the mid or late 80s?
Yeah. It was sold in 85. I think it probably maybe 75, but that puts us 77. You said was the flood.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that, and then he built that store out there. He shouldn't have built that store out there. And even out at Metcalf, it wasn't quite as good. It was the anchor store out at Ward Parkway. So that, remember, that's a big deal to hold down a whole.
Well, where Dillard's is now is where the Woolf
is where
Brothers
Woolf Brothers
store.
was now.
Yeah.
Dillard's, yes.
You think the competition from a lot of the national chains that you mentioned
Yeah,
were
these
an
kind
issue?
of these kind of change, they're everything. Patagonia, it's J. Crew, it's because the way they used to retail is they'd have exclusives. And then Ralph Lauren, remember Ralph Lauren started a store? And then Woolf Brothers had the exclusive. You could only go to Woolf Brothers to buy that particular Ralph Lauren, and that's what you had to have, right?
And then when Ralph Lauren started his own store. That
Yeah,
was,
and
that's
then you know, remember Banana Republic came in. They tried to buy up Robert. My brother started this British khaki thing. I know they came to him. He was like,
well, now your father stayed on as president until about 1990 or somewhere in there. Is that?
yeah, he died in '99. Yeah, till 90 something. That's a good question. God, I didn't write that down. Yeah, he died in '99. So it was probably only 5 years before he sold it. He sold it to Carpenter, and then he got it back, and then he resold it again, and it kind of went away.
Why did he sell?
He had to. Things were just a mess. Things were not going well because there was hardly any stores like that anymore. You go down to the plaza and show me one. You know what I mean? That tomboy, it's as big as this room, and it's some kids down here making clothes. That kind of thing might come back, but that's what's happened to our plaza now. It's even the restaurants, California knows, you know. Everything is, it's everywhere USA.
Yeah.
The poor plaza and the poor downtown. My goodness, I went to Mark Sutherland's We project in the town pavilion, which was built next to Woolf Brothers. It was finished in 1985, about the same year. God, can you imagine this? It was built, I can remember when Alfred was saying, let's not have computers, and we were like, we think you should have computers. And they had you'd write a receipt for somebody, you'd stick it in this air thing, and it'd run up to some lady,
Vacuum
you know,
tube.
3 floors up, you know, yeah, the vacuum tube, remember that?
And then they would send it back down after
I know,
that.
the store had a really good smell, all wood and polish and brass polish, remember?
And he didn't want computers?
No, they didn't want computers, you know, think of it. So next door here, 1985 is Town Pavilion. And AT&T bought that to be an anchor and saved downtown. And that was in 85. Think if downtown was already going. And so they had a huge, 700 or 800, it's the second tallest building in downtown. And in 1988 or something like that, was the Excel spreadsheet, and all of AT&T, they backed out. They built the biggest building in downtown, and then there was nobody there, like in 2 more years. You know, is that crazy? So that would have been a drain having that downtown store. Nobody went downtown anymore.
Well, should your father maybe have tried to modernize or bring in some different managers, or what should have happened, do you think, in those latter years? Or were the trends
That's
just,
the hard question. Why?
Or were the-
None of these are the right questions. No.
or were the trends just inevitable?
I think it was hugely a trend, and I am not an expert on this. I think he made some mistakes within the family. I think that the family could have run it and done it differently, but he would have had to hand it over. He was difficult to work with. He'd had all those health problems, and still nobody in the family could work with him. So, I mean, it could have been done differently. Who's to say, you know, how it would have panned out? But you don't see, are there any of those old stores left? Michael's downtown?
Michael's, whose founder just passed away last week.
Right.
And what about Jack Henry?
No, it's so diminished. The guy from Jack Henry bought Woolf Brothers. Jack Henry, do you ever shop there?
No.
Okay, and do you?
Oh, it's been years.
Okay, so there you go.
I mean-
And it's one little something here, and they used to have quite a presence too. But it wasn't the presence that Woolf Brothers had, because Woolf Brothers had designer women's clothes. There's no store like it today in Kansas City. We had that Saks, which was a grade C, which is their C grade store. They grade them. You know, so they have a higher end store with the good designer clothes, but Kansas City had a very successful Saks, but it was a grade C store. So you didn't have the great things there. My God, you used to walk in and the ladies, they'd put these gloves on your hands, you know, you'd put them, they'd probably have a form to hold your elbow, and they'd, you know, Alfred gave away ties, you know. People had a good time working in there. Same old people, you'd go have your same person to wait on you all the time.
Isn't part of the problem is we've just become a blue jeans society, and there's less demand by men and women for the kind of clothing that a Harsfeld's or a
but you can adjust.
Or a Woolf
but
Brothers
there is no Harsfeld's. They had the same problems. I don't know.
well, Swanson's.
Swanson's, Halls.
Halls
Is hanging on by a thread.
They're not doing very well.
Oh, that's it. And I heard it's been a tax write-off since day one. And I mean, so let me see. And what else do they have down there? BCBG? You know, no.
Well, how did you feel when you saw Woolf Brothers sold and then eventually closed?
Well, I was unhappy about the business deal that went down. Alfred was not, he didn't share much. And he had a lot of, I don't know that his managers, I don't think that thing was, I don't think his lawyers did him great service at all. I mean, they didn't.
Do you recall were family members upset at the clothing, the loss of the store, or
I was glad. I just thought it could never be good enough. It could never be good enough. But then, now that it's gone, you can see it was really swell. So it's so personal. You know, it's just like this big elephant all the time. If we didn't look good, you know, I still can't walk out of the house with a pair of tennis shoes on unless I'm going to the gym. There's a lot of rules that we had to look good, you know, and you could never look quite good enough.
And you still feel that?
And now for this interview, it really makes me feel like that, yeah.
Are we ever going to go back to an era where we have stores like Woolf Brothers?
I think they have them in Abu Dhabi. I think the Middle East is full of it.
For the ultra rich, yeah.
Oh, there are. They've got some lovely stores on Madison Avenue, and I think that you and I aren't talking, and that's out of our range. But I think there's you know, whoever those 1% of the really wealthy people around the world, you know, they have great service for them. They have beautiful clothes.
That's not here, though. Do you ever see a time in the future when maybe there could be a return to some of this?
I think it has to do, well, it's a good overviewing kind of look, because there would have to be some kind of great wealth or industry where things are really splashing around with a lot of money. Wouldn't there? So what was it, the 50s, everything was growing all over the world, and even the Midwest is, if people actually move back to the city like they say they're doing now, and we didn't have all that spread, and then maybe there'd be, and people quit ordering all their clothes online. Now you can order, you know, Saint Laurent online, you know, with the click of a finger. So maybe shopping has changed altogether now.
Well, it's not totally a function of being well-to-do, is it? It's as much.
Well, you used to like to dress up. Man, we used to go downtown, put on a pair of gloves, put on a pair of white gloves, and you dress up. People wore white gloves to go on the airplane. And now, as you said, there are more jeans now. They're wearing sweatsuits on the airplane.
And flip-flops.
It used to not ever happen. And so, yeah, we have a more relaxed society. I think some people like to go and get pampered and get looked at and have fine clothes. And if you have the money to play with, fine clothes can be expensive. You're not in a suit. You didn't come over here in a suit. And maybe if you would have been like 40 years ago, maybe you would have.
Oh, probably less than 40 years.
Uh-huh.
A man used to have to wear a tie and a jacket to fly.
Right, and a hat. And even think of you, Mark, as the photographer. Think of all those old guys going to the mines in England and they were wearing suits, you know. Remember that?
Yeah.
You still see it in some, you know, Eastern European kind of poor countries.
You didn't really want to be involved in the store when you were a young woman. Uh-huh. Have you, as you've aged and the store has disappeared. Have your feelings changed towards it at all?
Well, I think it was wonderful, and I like that kind of shopping. It was fun to go there, and it was fun to be able to buy clothes and not have to pay for them because Alfred did it. I'd take that again. That was good. And it was nice to have access to the great quality. I can't find it here. I have to go to New York if I want to find something great. But then I was living, you know, if Alfred was funding it, I had more money to play with. But I don't have that kind of money as an artist. I don't have that kind of money to play with. And I also have some kind of, you know, purse from Gucci or Prada sometimes. A great purse can be $17,000, and you can buy a house east of Truce for that. And you know, you know what I mean? I just have a little trouble with that. I have a little trouble reconciling that kind of thing. And I think it's probably some of that's always gone on, certainly, but I don't know. I ethically, I can't, if I wanted to, and I don't want to, and I don't want to have that kind of money, but it's against my principles to be walking around with a $20,000 purse. You know, is that a weird thing to say?
No. But you are going to some effort to preserve memories and records
it's a
of the
history,
store.
and it's an interesting history, and as Sybil said, you know, it's an interesting history of our city and of the industry. It was important. It was wonderful to go downtown, and I have pictures of the development of downtown, and Woolf Brothers was one of the first, and my grandfather on my mother's side, my mother's father, Herbert, and his name was Albert. You know, they worked together to develop downtown, and on my mother's side of the family, her mother, that family, you know, ran the all of the vaudeville through town. Because can't you see all this interesting stuff going on? There's kind of fun interaction as things built up. And it's interesting to be here because you have some kind of ties.
Have you ever thought of doing a book on the family?
No, people ask me, and Phoebe should have done it. I'm not old enough yet, and I'm not organized. I really like to run around the studio and make artwork. I would rather make clothes than make the book about the clothes. You know what I mean? I just, not
Well,
much
who put together that CD of photographs that I
Yeah, I
copied?
have it here. I have all this stuff here. So, Dickie did it.
Richard Hollander Jr.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I have that if it's of interest.
I think I made copies for Sybil. Didn't I give her?
I think we might have.
one or
And
two
that is,
copies.
yeah, it's a really, so it has the...
It's got Lauren running in the Kentucky
it has
Derby
everything.
and all that
It's
kind
got
of
the
stuff.
Derby, it's got all that stuff.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Are we done?
Are you done?
I guess.
Are you done, Linda?
I guess.
Well, you said you weren't expecting some of the questions. What was a question that you would like to get?
Well, I thought we'd be running through the history of...
Ask yourself a question and then answer it.
Okay. So I thought that... I just think it's interesting to see these guys, and I guess I should have showed you the picture of these guys with the shirt factory, and just how the history of the West and this, I guess that's what's interesting to me, how the city developed, how they went from Leavenworth to downtown, and then how they spread out from there. And then, yeah, I guess we did. We covered what that fashion industry was like, and then its demise. That's interesting. And how it is here now in this time when, you know, the Plaza was one of the first shopping centers in the country. And now it isn't a Kansas City person anymore.
Well, I don't think anything you told me was not interesting.
God, it's weird. You don't know if you should be talking. Herbert was running around with Gert, Richard Hollander's mother, to all those horse races, and there's pictures of them in this thing.
We better stop recording if we're going to talk about Herbert running around, Mark.
Well, I mean, I guess Gert was considered a really gorgeous, one of the great beauties of her time. Surprisingly enough, I don't know if she would be now. She was really handsome. But to think of her as the great beauty isn't what I would think. Did you know Gert?
No.
Uh-huh.
Were they part of Kansas City society in the later years, or were they not really allowed?
Oh, yeah. Of course, yeah. Well, I think there was a Jewish society, and of course they were there. But then, yeah.
Of course, you said they contributed to the Jewel Ball.
Yeah, they were founders. So the thing, my sister was, I refused to do it. I wouldn't do it. My daughter did it. I'm
Yeah.
like, honey, you did nothing to do this except for you had a grandfather who did something. Yeah.
You refused to be a debutante?
I wouldn't do it. No way.
That's funny.
You were wearing an Indian print dress and
Yeah.
with flowers in your hair.
You bet. And no shoes.
Well, if you went to Haight-Ashbury, you were a serious hippie.
I was very, very serious, yes.
How long were you out there?
Well, I was out there, what, in 68 and 69. And by 69, I was in Seattle and had a kid. And then after a while, I moved to Colville Indian Reservation and did this back to land thing. 80 miles from a grocery store, folks.
Really?
Yeah. So,
How long have you lived in Kansas City?
since 1982, 3, something. Yeah, I moved back here to keep an eye on Alfred. He's out of control. You know? So, you know.
How'd you meet Lynn?
I met him in Idaho. I lived in Idaho. And
You should talk to Lynn. He's a really great guy.
yeah.
You
Linda's husband.
Yeah.
No, I'm still rolling on this because I'm fascinated with her 60s, 70s
Oh,
thing.
yeah. Well, yeah.
Because I was freaking out too.
Well, are you reluctant?
You were, weren't you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, are you reluctant to talk about it?
I
I detect a little.
I don't know. Am I on screen? I mean, we had a pretty strange family. I mean, it was
I
out of
told Mark
control.
to stop.
Okay, I'll
Yeah.
stop the film.
No, we had a weird family.